little different. This isn't the story of a boss screaming at you or some clear HR violation. No, this is about a system, a culture that's so obsessed with growth that it ends up breaking the very people who are building it. It's a story where the real damage, it isn't what was illegal, but what was just business as usual. And that right there, that's the whole puzzle, isn't it? We're all taught to look for the smoking gun, the specific law that was broken. But what happens when the real harm comes from things that are perfectly legal, things that are actually encouraged by the company you work for? That's the really unsettling idea we're going to dig into. So yeah, that's the big question, right? How does a company end up creating this environment of anxiety and burnout and just deep ethical conflict without a single bad guy you can point to? To even begin to answer that, you have to look at the evidence. All right, so where do we start? Well, our story really kicks off at a specific turning point, a moment when the private, internal world of one of the planet's biggest companies got blown wide open by one of its own. Her name is Frances Haugen, and she wasn't just some disgruntled employee. She was a product manager. And in 2021, she did something incredibly brave and risky. She walked out with thousands of internal documents that showed exactly what the company knew about the real-world impact of its products. Now get this. This isn't some critic's hot take or a journalist's accusation. This is a direct quote from a slide deck inside Facebook. This came from their own research. They knew. They had the hard data that showed their platform, Instagram, was actively harming a huge number of its youngest users. Seriously, just let that number sink in for a second. 1 in 3. Think about the sheer scale of that. This wasn't some minor bug or a fringe issue. This was a direct, systemic outcome of how the whole thing was designed to work. And that was Hagen's whole point. This wasn't a case of, oops, we didn't know. It was about a deliberate choice. She argued that the company had the tools, they had the knowledge to make things safer, but time and time again, the choice was made to put profits and growth first. So what was really driving those choices? To understand the why behind all of this, you have to look under the hood at the cultural engine that was powering the entire company, the core belief system that drove every single decision. I'm sure you've heard this motto, move fast and break things. It sounds so cool, right? So innovative. But what it actually created was a culture of nonstop, frantic urgency. And that term, break things, well, the collateral damage often ended up being user well-being or even the mental health of the employees. It was just seen as the cost of doing business. Just look at this. This chart tells you everything you need to know about what was actually valued inside the company. It all came down to engagement metrics. More likes, more shares, more time on the platform. That huge slice of the pie is what got you promoted. And user safety, mental health impact, yeah, they're on there, but they were tiny slivers. They were never the real priority. So what does that actually feel like when you're an engineer or a product manager working there? It means your entire performance is judged on your ability to pump up those engagement numbers. There's no time to stop and ask, hey, is this a good idea? And if you did raise a concern, it usually got lost in the shuffle, buried under the pressure to just ship the next feature. Your success was tied directly to feeding that growth machine, period. Now, this kind of relentless pressure, it doesn't just create harmful products. It takes a huge psychological toll on the employees themselves. And this is where we shift from talking about a systems problem to a deeply, deeply human one. You hear this again and again from people who left. They were doing their jobs well, they were hitting their targets, getting promotions, making engagement go up, but at the same time, they were seeing that internal research. They knew there was a dark side to it, and it left them feeling trapped, feeling like they were complicit in something that was way bigger than them. And there's actually a term for this feeling. It's not just burnout. It's called moral injury. It's the specific kind of psychological damage that happens when your job forces you, day in and day out, to do things or to be a part of things that go against your own core values. This is so important to understand because it's not the same thing as getting bullied at work. Bullying is direct, it's personal, and it's usually against the rules. Moral injury, on the other hand, is indirect. It comes from the system itself. Everything you're being asked to do is perfectly legal, totally within company policy. The villain isn't a person you can report. It's the system. You can't file an HR complaint against the performance review metrics. Okay, so we've seen the evidence, we understand the motive, we've seen the human cost. So what's the verdict here? What really happened? It's the question everyone wants to ask, right? If it's not just one bad manager, not one evil executive pulling the strings, then who or what is actually the culprit? See, the thing is, you can't just point your finger at one person. The real problem, it's the system. It's the algorithms that were built to reward the most extreme, emotional content because that's what keeps you scrolling. It's the incentives that made growth the only thing that really mattered. It's a culture that implicitly told you to shut up if you tried to slow things down. And yeah, ultimately, it's a leadership that chose to look away from the warning flares being sent out by their own people. And this is where it gets just wild. You have the public statement versus the internal reality. Mark Zuckerberg goes out and says the idea they'd push angry content for profit is deeply illogical. But at the exact same time, their own internal documents confirmed that the algorithms were doing precisely that, amplifying divisive stuff because it was fantastic for engagement. The two realities simply couldn't coexist. And that's really the big takeaway, isn't it? This is what a modern toxic workplace can look like. It's quiet, it's systemic, and it doesn't need to break a single law to do profound damage. They just built a machine that did it for them, silently and efficiently. And it leaves you wondering, how many of us are working inside a machine just like it?